47 seconds. That is not a long time. In most situations, 47 seconds is nothing. It's the length of a commercial. It's how long it takes to pour a cup of coffee. It's barely enough time to notice. But on live national television, 47 seconds of silence is an eternity. And on this particular afternoon, on the bright, loud, always moving set of Family Feud, 47 seconds was exactly how long Steve Harvey stood completely frozen, not moving, not speaking, not even blinking, according to people who were there in the room. He just stood there, looking at a 16-year-old boy. A boy in a neat blue button-down shirt that was slightly too big for him, the kind of shirt you borrow from a relative because you don't own one that fits. A boy standing very straight because someone had told him to stand up straight on television, and he was doing exactly that. A boy who had just said 9 words that stopped one of the most experienced entertainers in America dead in his tracks. 9 words. That's all it was. Steve Harvey had asked the boy a simple question, the kind he asks every family, every episode. Friendly, easy, just conversation. And the boy had looked up at him, calm, clear-eyed, not looking for sympathy, just telling the truth the way a person does when they've already done all their falling apart in private, and said, "I'm playing for my mom's funeral. Missed Harvey." And then Steve Harvey froze. The audience froze. The production team froze. The cameras kept rolling because that's what cameras do. But everyone behind them, everyone with a pulse, stopped completely. 47 seconds. That is how long it took Steve Harvey to find words again. And when he finally did find them, he would say something that night that nobody on his team had ever heard him say before in 30 years of live television. But before that, you need to know who this boy was, where he came from, what he was carrying, and how he ended up standing on that stage in that borrowed shirt saying those 9 words to a man who had seen everything. This is the story of Marcus Webb, and it will break your heart open and put it back together again. Marcus Deshaun Webb was 16 years old and lived in Macon, Georgia, a mid-sized city in the middle of the state that most people drive through on their way somewhere else. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on Birchwood Avenue with his mother Sandra, who had been raising him alone since he was 4 years old. Sandra Webb was 41. She drove a school bus from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Then she drove home, changed clothes, and walked 3 blocks to her second job, waitressing at a diner called Cozy Corner that served breakfast all day and stayed open until 10 at night. She did this 6 days a week. On Sundays she went to church and came home and cooked a full meal and did laundry and checked Marcus's homework for the week ahead. She had done this without a break for 12 years. Not because she had no other options, not because she didn't dream of something easier, but because Marcus had a school trip every year and new shoes every fall and a birthday cake with the right number of candles and a mother who was always at his games. Even when she had worked a double, even when her feet hurt, even when it would have been completely understandable to stay home and rest. Sandra was always there. She was the loudest voice in the bleachers. She embarrassed Marcus regularly and completely, and he loved every second of it. She called him My Marcus, always with the my in front, like a title, like ownership, like pride. She kept every report card he had ever gotten in a folder in the kitchen drawer. She still had his kindergarten drawings taped to the inside of her closet door. And Sandra Webb was, in the specific and devoted way of a person who has found their show, absolutely obsessed with Family Feud. Every evening that she was home before 8 o'clock, which was not every evening, but as many as she could manage, the television went on, the show came up, and Sandra and Marcus sat on the couch and played along. She was fast, scarily fast. She seemed to know instinctively what 100 people would say because she understood people, how they think, what they reach for first, what feels most obvious to the average person on an average day. She had applied to be on Family Feud 3 times. Each time she got the application, filled it out carefully, assembled a family team, submitted it with a video, and waited. The first 2 times she heard nothing. The 3rd time she got an email saying her application had been received and was under review, and then nothing after that. She had told Marcus about the 3rd application at dinner one night. He had said, "You're going to get on, Mom," and she had said, "One of these days, baby, one of these days." She had already started a 4th application. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, half filled out, in her handwriting, neat and looping, the way she wrote everything when she died. It happened on a Tuesday morning in February. Marcus was at school. Sandra had just finished her bus route and was back in the lot, parked, filling out the daily log. The other drivers found her when she didn't come in for the post-route sign-out. A cardiac event, the doctors called it. A sudden, massive cardiac event. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. She was 41 years old. Marcus was called out of his 3rd period English class by the school counselor. He knew before she said a word. He sat in the chair in her office and listened to her speak, and then he sat very still for a long time afterward. He didn't cry right away. He told the counselor he was okay. She knew he wasn't, but she also understood that some kinds of grief need privacy before they need comfort. She called his Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol, Sandra's older sister, drove from her house in Warner Robins and was there within 40 minutes. She brought her husband Derek. She took Marcus home to Birchwood Avenue, and she sat with him that night, and the next night, and the night after that. And then the reality of what Sandra had left behind began to emerge. Sandra Webb had no life insurance. She had meant to get it. It was on a list she kept on her phone of things to do when she had a little extra money, but there had always been something more immediate. A school fee, a car repair, a medical bill. The list had never gotten shorter. The life insurance had never gotten bought. Her savings account had $340 in it. The cost of a basic funeral and burial in Macon, Georgia, the absolute minimum, with no extras, a simple casket and a graveside service, was $6,200. The funeral home was sympathetic. They held Sandra's body and gave the family 30 days to arrange payment before they would need to pursue other arrangements. The phrase "other arrangements" sat in the room like a stone that nobody wanted to touch. Carol and Derek did not have $6,200. They had their own mortgage, their own car payment, their own children in school. They stretched and calculated and could put together $1,800, which left $4,400. Marcus knew all of this. Carol had tried to keep it from him, but he was 16, not 6. He could hear the phone calls. He could see the numbers on the notepad on Carol's kitchen table. He understood what was happening. And one evening, 3 weeks after his mother died, he went back to the apartment on Birchwood Avenue to get some of his things, clothes, his school books, his charger, and he saw the half-filled application on the kitchen counter. He stood in front of it for a long time. He picked it up. He read it in his mother's handwriting. He read the section where she had written about why their family should be on Family Feud. And she had written, in her neat looping script, "Because we love this show more than anything and we always win at home." Marcus set the application down. He sat at the kitchen counter. And he sat there for a long time in the apartment that still smelled like his mother's cooking and his mother's lotion and his mother's laundry detergent. Then he picked up a pen. He completed the application. He put Carol's name as the adult contact. He filmed the family audition video with Carol and Derek and their 2 kids in Carol's living room. He uploaded it at 11:30 at night from the library computer because the internet at Birchwood Avenue had already been shut off. And then he went home to Carol's house and went to bed. The call came 11 days later. Carol almost didn't pick up. It was an unknown number, and unknown numbers in the weeks after Sandra's death had generally meant bill collectors and insurance adjusters and people delivering paperwork about things that had gone wrong. But she picked up, and the woman on the other end of the line said she was calling from Family Feud and that the Webb family's application had been selected. Carol sat down on the kitchen floor. She called Marcus into the room. He stood in the doorway, still in his school clothes, backpack on. She told him. He looked at her. His face did something complicated, something that was not quite a smile and not quite crying and not quite either of those things, but somewhere in the middle of all of it. She would have loved this, he said. She's the reason you got it, Carol said. Marcus nodded slowly. I know. The taping was 4 weeks away. Marcus used those 4 weeks the way his mother would have used them. He studied. He watched every Family Feud episode he could find on YouTube. He practiced the most common survey answers the way other kids practice free throws, repetitive, deliberate, every single day. He filled a notebook with answers organized by category. Things you find in a kitchen, things you do on a first date, things that make you nervous, things your grandmother keeps in her purse. Carol watched him do this from the kitchen doorway and said nothing. Because there was nothing useful to say. This was Marcus processing his grief the only way that made sense to him, through preparation. Through purpose, through doing the thing his mother had always done, getting ready. The morning of the taping, Marcus woke up at 5:30. Carol had laid out Derek's blue button-down shirt the night before. It was the nicest one in the house, and Derek had ironed it twice. It was slightly too big for Marcus's shoulders. Carol rolled the sleeves to his forearm and told him he looked excellent. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a moment before they left. He was talking, but not to himself. Carol could hear him from the hallway. She didn't go closer. She just listened. I'm going, Mom, he said. I've got the answers. You taught me all of them. A pause. I just need you to help with the ones I don't know. Another pause. I'm going to bring you home. I promise. Carol went to the kitchen and quietly cried into a dish towel for 2 minutes. Then she dried her face. And they went. The studio was enormous and bright and overwhelming in exactly the way that places are overwhelming when you've only ever seen them on television. A production assistant took them through orientation, explained the rules, showed them to the green room. The other family that day, the Okafor family from Atlanta, a large, boisterous family with matching jackets, were already there, laughing and warming up like a team before a game. Marcus sat with his hands folded in his lap and went over answers in his head. When the time came and the Webb family walked out onto the stage, the audience applauded and cheered the way they always do. Carol waved. Derek smiled wide. The two cousins, Jalen and Brianna, looked like they might explode from excitement. Marcus walked out last. He stood at the edge of the family group, straight-backed in the borrowed shirt, and he looked out at the audience and then at the cameras and then at the big bright set he had watched on a small television from a couch in Macon for as long as he could remember. He took one breath, and he was steady. Steve Harvey moved through the family introductions with his usual warmth and energy, names, cities, jobs, quick jokes. He got to Carol, who introduced herself. He got to Derek. He got to the cousins who made the audience laugh. And then he turned to Marcus. And this young man right here, come on, step up, tell me your name. Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb. How old are you, Marcus? 16, sir, 16. Look at you. What grade are you in? 11th grade. Steve grinned at the audience. 11th grade on Family Feud. Already ahead of the game. He looked back at Marcus. Now, Marcus, tell me something. What made you want to come on the show today? Why are the Webbs here? And Marcus Webb, 16 years old, in a borrowed shirt that was too big. standing under lights that were brighter than anything he'd ever stood under, looked at Steve Harvey directly and said it. Calm, clear, no drama. Just the truth. I'm playing for my mom's funeral, Mr. Harvey. She applied to this show 3 times. She never got on. She taught me all the answers. A breath. I figured she should finally get her chance. And Steve Harvey froze. His smile didn't fall. It didn't crumple. It just stopped, like a clock that hits a certain hour and simply ceases to move. His eyes fixed on Marcus. His hand, which had been gesturing slightly, the natural motion of a man who talks with his hands, dropped to his side. The audience went completely, entirely, stunningly silent. No whispers. No shifting in seats. Nothing. 1 second. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. The floor director, standing off camera, looked at his watch and later told the production team he clocked it. 47 seconds. 47 seconds of Steve Harvey standing still, looking at this boy, unable to produce a single word. The cameras kept rolling. A producer in the booth said, quietly, into the headsets, "Let it breathe. Let it breathe." On stage in the silence, Marcus did not look away. He didn't fidget or look at his shoes or get uncomfortable the way teenagers sometimes do when adults look at them too long. He stood straight. He held Steve's gaze. He had already said everything he came to say. He would wait as long as necessary. When Steve Harvey finally spoke, his voice came out different from the way it had gone in. Lower, slower, like something in him had been rearranged. "Say that again," Steve said. "Say what you just told me." Marcus said it again. Steve Harvey nodded once. He looked at the floor briefly, the same thing he had done with Callahan, the same thing that happens to a man when something hits him somewhere he wasn't guarding. Then he looked back up. "How long ago did you lose her?" 6 weeks, sir." Steve closed his eyes for 3 seconds, opened them. "And you came here. 6 weeks later. You came here for her. She would have come for me," Marcus said simply. In the audience, a woman in the 3rd row started crying and never really stopped for the rest of the taping. 2 of the production assistants had to step out of the booth. The Okafor family, on the other side of the stage, who had come in loud and ready to compete, stood in absolute silence with their hands folded. Steve Harvey put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. He stood there for a moment with his hand on this boy's shoulder, looking at him with an expression that the audience later described in 100 different ways. As pride, as grief, as recognition, as something that didn't have a word. Then he straightened, and his voice came back, not all the way, not the showman's voice, but enough. "Marcus," he said, "your mother raised a man. You hear me? Not a boy. A man." He looked at Carol. He is going to play this game, and he is going to play it like his mother is watching, because she is. Carol covered her face with both hands. Marcus nodded once, pressed his lips together. "I know," he said. The Webb family played Family Feud like they had been training for it their whole lives. Because in a way, because of Sandra, they had. Carol was sharp and quick. Derek anchored the team with steady, reliable answers. Jalen and Brianna played with energy that kept the audience engaged. And Marcus was something else entirely. He was precise. Unhurried, he would step to the buzzer and wait, and when the question came, he answered the way his mother had answered from the couch on Birchwood Avenue, fast, instinctive, confident. They won the main game without much drama. The Okafor family were good, genuinely good, but the Webbs were something beyond good. They were playing for something. And when you play for something real, it shows in every movement. Fast money. Carol went first. She was excellent. She scored 116 points, a very strong first round. They needed 84 more. It was a big number, but not impossible. Steve walked to the Fast Money podium where Marcus stood. The studio had been carrying the weight of what Marcus had said since the beginning of the show. And now everyone in the room understood that this was the moment everything had been building toward. The cameras, the audience, the production crew. Everyone. Steve stood across from Marcus and looked at him for a moment. "You ready?" he asked. And it was the same question he always asked, but tonight it meant something different. Tonight it was not a hosting prompt. It was a real question. Marcus looked back at him. She used to say, when the questions start, stop thinking and start knowing. Just know the answer. He paused. "I'm ready." Steve nodded. He raised his cards. 20 seconds. "Here we go, Marcus. Name something you do every morning without thinking about it." "Brush your teeth," Marcus said. "Name a word that describes a really good mother." Marcus's jaw tightened for 1 second. "Just one." "Strong," he said. "Name a place where people wait and nobody is happy about it." "The DMV." "Name something kids always want that their parents can't always afford." Marcus answered without hesitation, "New shoes." The audience felt it, because everyone in that room had already heard about Sandra working 2 jobs. Everyone knew what that answer meant underneath. Name something a hard-working parent never does enough of. Marcus paused. Half a second, not uncertainty, just something moving through him. Then, sleep. The buzzer sounded. Steve read the first reveal. "Brush your teeth," number 1 answer. 47 points. The audience applauded. Carol grabbed Derek's arm, strong, for a word describing a really good mother. The board flipped. Number 1 answer, 39 points. The audience cheered. Marcus stood still. DMV, number 1 answer, 31 points. The running total crossed 100. They were close. New shoes. Steve paused before revealing. He looked at Marcus. Survey said, the board flipped. Number 1 answer, 36 points. Running total, 213 points. They had already crossed 200. They had already won the $20,000. But nobody moved, because there was one answer left. And everyone in that room understood, without anyone saying it, that this last one was not about points. Steve Harvey looked at his card. He looked at Marcus. He read it slowly. You said sleep for something a hard-working parent never does enough of. He stopped reading. He set the card down. He looked at the board. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the audience. And when he spoke, his voice was barely held together. Before I flip this, I need to say something. He turned fully to face Marcus. Your mama worked 2 jobs 6 days a week, so you never missed a school trip, and you always had shoes that fit. She sat on a couch with you every night and taught you every answer on this show. She applied 3 times to stand where you are standing right now. He stopped, took a breath. She never got here. But you did, and you brought her with you. Every answer you gave tonight, that was her. The studio was completely silent. Marcus Webb, 16 years old, 6 weeks without his mother, standing in a borrowed shirt under lights she had always wanted to stand under, pressed his lips together hard and looked straight ahead. His eyes were full, but he did not look down. He stood exactly as straight as he had walked out. Steve Harvey turned to the board. Survey said. The answer flipped. Sleep. Number 1 answer. 44 points. And then Steve Harvey did something nobody had ever seen him do on Family Feud. He walked away from the podium, not toward the audience, not toward the cameras. He walked the 6 steps to the edge of the stage, turned his back to everyone, and stood there for a moment. His shoulders moved once. The audience understood. They did not make a sound. After a moment he turned back around. His face was composed, but his eyes were red at the edges. He walked back to Marcus and put both hands on the boy's shoulders and looked him in the face. 257 points, he said. Your family wins $20,000. He held Marcus's gaze. And your mama gets to come home. Marcus Webb broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. He just bent forward slightly and put his face in his hands, and his whole body shook. Once, twice, 3 times, with the kind of crying that has been held in for 6 weeks by a boy who was trying to be the strong one. Carol crossed the stage in 4 steps and wrapped both arms around him. Derek was right behind her. Jalen and Brianna piled in. The audience was on their feet, not cheering, just standing, the way people stand at things that deserve to be stood for. Steve Harvey stood at the edge of the family huddle and let them have the moment. He did not speak. He did not move toward a camera. He just stood there. After a minute, Marcus looked up. His face was wet, and his eyes were red, and he looked younger than 16 and older than 16 at the same time. The specific look of a child who has been required by life to become something more. He looked at Steve Harvey. "Thank you," he said. Steve shook his head. "Don't thank me," he said. "Your mother did all of this. You were just the one she sent to pick it up." The clip of Marcus saying those 9 words, "I'm playing for my mom's funeral, Mr. Harvey," was on the internet before the episode had even finished airing. It was not posted by the network. It was posted by an audience member who had recorded it on their phone, shaking slightly. The caption was 3 words, "I can't breathe." Within 4 hours it had 11 million views. By the next morning it was the top trending clip on every major platform. By the end of the week, the number was 73 million, and the follow-up clip, the one of Steve Harvey walking to the edge of the stage and turning his back to the audience, had another 40 million on top of that. People were not sharing it for the drama. They were sharing it because it was true. Because a 16-year-old boy in a borrowed shirt had said the most heartbreaking thing imaginable in the calmest, most dignified voice, and in doing so had said something on behalf of every child who had ever lost a parent too soon, and every parent who had ever worked themselves to exhaustion so their child would have what they needed, and every family that had ever faced the particular cruelty of not being able to afford to bury someone they loved. The response was immediate and staggering. A GoFundMe launched by a woman in Ohio who had never met the Webb family raised $41,000 in 36 hours. The funeral home in Macon received so many calls from strangers offering to cover costs that they had to take their phone off the hook. A casket company in Georgia contacted Carol directly and provided Sandra's casket at no charge. A florist in Macon, who had watched the clip in her shop and cried through an entire arrangement she was working on, filled the funeral with flowers and refused to accept payment. Sandra Webb was buried on a Saturday morning, 2 weeks after the episode aired, in a cemetery 3 miles from the apartment on Birchwood Avenue. The service was at their church. The church was full, not just with the people who had known Sandra, but with strangers from around the city who came because they felt they knew her. Because in a way, after what Marcus had said on national television, everybody did. The pastor spoke about Sandra's work ethic and her faith, and the specific kind of love that expresses itself through showing up. He said she had raised a son who proved in front of 30 million people that her life had mattered, that her sacrifice had produced something the world could see. Marcus sat in the front pew in a suit that now fit him. A real one. His own, that Carol had bought for the occasion. He was quiet through the service the way he had been quiet through so much of the last 2 months. But at the graveside, when the pastor offered him a moment to speak if he wanted, he stood up. He held a folded piece of paper. He had written something down because he knew himself well enough to know he would need it. He read, "My mom used to say that the best thing about Family Feud was that regular people got to be on television and act like they mattered. And she was right. Regular people do matter. She mattered. She worked 2 jobs and she never complained, and she was at every game and she knew every answer, and she applied to that show 3 times because she believed that someday someone would see her." He paused. They did, Mom. They saw you. All of them. 73 million people saw you, and they all knew exactly who you were. He folded the paper. You finally got on the show. And you won. Just like you always said you would. There was not a dry eye at that graveside. Not one. Steve Harvey, who had been following the story closely since the taping, flew to Macon for the funeral. He had not announced it publicly. He did not bring cameras. He came quietly, sat in the back of the church, and at the graveside he stood among the mourners without drawing attention. After the service he found Marcus and Carol and said his piece privately, away from the crowd. Nobody reported what he said. That was the way he wanted it. In the months that followed, the $20,000 in prize money, combined with the GoFundMe funds after the funeral costs were covered, created a financial foundation for Marcus that Sandra had never been able to build during her lifetime. Carol and Derek established a custodial account. The money was set aside, protected, earmarked for Marcus's future. An education nonprofit that had seen the story reached out within weeks of the episode airing. They offered Marcus a full scholarship to any four-year university of his choice to be activated when he graduated. A second organization offered a summer program at a journalism and media school because Marcus, it turned out, had been writing. Quietly, in notebooks, the way his mother had filled out applications, carefully, hopefully, in the belief that what he put down mattered, he accepted both. Steve Harvey's production company partnered with a national foundation focused on final expense insurance access. The specific gap that had left Sandra Webb without coverage to fund a public awareness campaign. The campaign was called Bring Them Home, and its goal was simple: to connect low-income working families with affordable burial insurance options before they needed them. In its first 6 months, the campaign enrolled over 12,000 families. Marcus was asked to be part of the launch. He stood at a podium, a real one, not a game show podium, and spoke for 4 minutes about his mother. He spoke the way he had spoken to Steve Harvey, calm, clear, looking directly at the people in front of him. He said that Sandra Webb had spent her life making sure other people were taken care of, and that the one thing she had left undone was taking care of her own ending. He said he wanted no other family to stand where his family had stood. He said his mother deserved better, and so did every other Sandra in America. He sat down to a standing ovation. Back in Macon, the apartment on Birchwood Avenue was eventually cleared and closed. Carol kept a few things, the folder from the kitchen drawer with every report card Marcus had ever gotten, the kindergarten drawings from the closet door, and the half-filled Family Feud application from the kitchen counter, Sandra's 4th attempt, completed in Marcus's handwriting, the one that had gotten them there. Carol framed it. It hangs in her living room in Warner Robins. Marcus visits on Sundays for dinner. After dinner, at 6 o'clock, the television goes on. Carol and Derek and the cousins sit in the living room, and Marcus sits with them and they watch Family Feud. They shout answers at the screen. They argue about which answer is better. Marcus is usually right, and everyone gives him a hard time about it. He takes it the way his mother always took it, laughing, rolling his eyes, pointing at the screen when the survey proves him correct. One evening, a few months into this new Sunday routine, Carol looked over at Marcus during a commercial break. He was staring at the television with a small, private smile on his face, the kind you don't perform for anyone else. "What are you thinking?" Carol asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Just talking to her," he said. Carol nodded. She looked back at the television. "She hears you," she said. Marcus looked at the screen. The show came back on. The host asked a family a question. The family rushed the buzzer. The audience cheered. "I know," he said. "Sandra Webb never got on Family Feud. But she got everything she was playing for. Her son graduated from 11th grade with honors. Her son will go to a university. Her son stood in front of 73 million people and made them understand who she was. She raised a boy who became the kind of man who shows up in a borrowed shirt and tells the truth and holds himself together when everything in him wants to fall apart. She did all of that. From a school bus. From a diner on the late shift. From a couch on Birchwood Avenue with the television on and her boy beside her. Regular people matter. Sandra Webb always knew that. Now the whole world does too.